school English teacher may have told you that there's no such thing as a bad question. Well, I hate to break it to you, but your high school English teacher was wrong. I think there are bad questions. One bad question is the title of this video. Can science and religion conflict, or do science and religion conflict with each other? I'm actually going to take several videos to unpack why I think this is a bad question. But here's the first tact I want to take, and I'm going to work through one argument for why I think this is a bad question in this video today. And that comes from this observation. To ask the question, do science and religion conflict, is to sort of lead with the assumption that there's this big sphere of inquiry on the one hand called science, and there's this domain of belief called religion on the other, and somehow those two things come into conflict with each other. But when we take a moment to reflect on that picture, it becomes obvious pretty quickly that that can't quite be right. It's not like there's an entire sphere of inquiry called science, and it's not like there's one gigantic sphere of belief called religion. Rather, there's sciences of particular topics, there's particular disciplines. Likewise, there's specific religious teachings and beliefs and practices. So what I want to suggest today is that while the question, do science and religion conflict, is kind of a poor one because it's too broad. It assumes that science and religion are these monolithic things that they just aren't. I think that what is a better question is, do science and religion conflict in this particular issue or on this particular question? Once we've made the question more precise, I think that that question becomes a better one. And in fact, we're able to answer it in some cases. And the answer, as we're going to see, is, well, sometimes yes, but sometimes no. Now, in order to get there, I want us to consider a couple of specific issues and questions. And we can see how science and religion relate to each other here. The first kind of relationship that science and religion can stand on in relation to a particular question is relative independence from each other. I've got two examples to illustrate this for you. First, consider the question, what's the atomic weight of gold? Perfectly plausible question. It's also the sort of question that you can get an answer in if you take a chemistry class. It's the sort of question that science is very comfortable answering and does a very good job answering. Religion, on the other hand, doesn't really answer it. At least I don't know of any religion that weighs in on the atomic weight of gold. It's not because religion isn't able to answer it or because religion doesn't care about that question at all. It's not the sort of question that religion is going to weigh in on, right? Religion really isn't concerned with questions about the atomic weight of gold. It's concerned with other kinds of questions. So when it comes to that question, what's the atomic weight of gold? Science and religion don't conflict with each other when it comes to answering that question. Why? Well, because science weighs in on it, gives it the answer, and religion kind of lets science do that, right? It says, well, we don't have an answer to give to that. Religion doesn't weigh in on the atomic weight of gold. Look to the sciences if you want an answer to that question. So no conflict there. Take the flip side. Take a question about the nature of the Trinity, for example. You could even get more specific. You could think about the famous Filioque controversy. Here, Roman Catholic Christians and Eastern Orthodox Christians disagree about whether the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son, or whether the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father alone. Now, if you're a Christian, that's a really important question to investigate and to answer. And in fact, different kinds of Christianity answer that question differently. So it's a properly religious question. It's a question that you might want to explore from a religious context. Science, though, doesn't really weigh in on it, right? There's no science of the Trinity. That doesn't really make any sense. It's not a scientific question to ask a question about the Trinity. So once again, we have an example of a question. What's the nature of the Trinity? Or more specifically, does the Holy Spirit proceed from the Father and the Son or from the Father alone? In which one domain, religion, might try and answer that question, but the other domain, science, doesn't really care about it, right? It doesn't really weigh in at all. So no conflict there either. What's the lesson? Well, there's some questions, some issues in which science and religion don't conflict because only one is weighing in on that question or issue. Take a different kind of question or issue. Sometimes science and religion both weigh in on the same issue or question, but don't really conflict with each other. Instead, they enter into dialogue with each other. Here's an example. You might be interested in why you find the Mona Lisa beautiful. It's a perfectly plausible question to ask, right? You look at the painting and think, that's beautiful. Why do I find that beautiful? Well, science can give you some of the answer to that question. It can tell you about the fact that human beings are hardwired to appreciate symmetry in faces. And then you look at the Mona Lisa and realize it's a very symmetrical painting, and you think, okay, well, that's part of the reason why I and others have found this painting beautiful. Likewise, you might study the reflectance properties of the painting itself and know how exactly it's reflecting light. And that might tell you a little bit about why you find it beautiful as well. But of course, religion also can help you understand why you find that painting beautiful. In the Christian tradition, beauty is one of the three transcendentals. There's truth, beauty, and goodness, all of which in the Christian tradition come from and are ultimately grounded in God. The truth, beauty, and goodness are sort of pathways to God in the Christian tradition. So to fully understand beauty and your experience of beauty in that tradition, well, you also need to understand something about beauty as a transcendental. In this case, are science and religion coming into conflict about why you find the painting beautiful? Not really. It's rather that science can give you part of the story. Part of the story has to do with your neurochemistry and the reflectance properties of the painting itself. And part of the story has to do with the theological, religious answer that beauty is one of the transcendentals and that beauty ultimately comes from God. Here then is a set of questions in which science and religion don't come into conflict because they are in dialogue with each other rather in outright conflict with each other. Turn then to the last kind of question. This is the kind of question or issue in which science and religion can come in conflict with each other. This is where science and religion both try and weigh in on one particular issue or question and give different answers to that issue or question. Two quick examples. The first one comes from a basic assumption of Christian theology, which is the idea of creation ex nihilo. Creation ex nihilo means that God created everything from nothing at some moment in time. One consequence of this religious theological belief is that the universe had a beginning. Now, some scientific theories of the beginning of the universe, most famously the Big Bang, agree with that perspective. But suppose that there was a scientific theory that disagreed, that said, no, there's actually an infinitely eternal universe. The universe really had no beginning. That's a sort of cosmology that might be plausible, but it's a sort of cosmology that comes into direct conflict with the idea of creation ex nihilo. So in this case, you've got a question, did the universe have a beginning? Science says, here our hypothetical theory, right, says, no, it didn't, and religion says yes. So you've got a kind of direct conflict here. Take another kind of example. Suppose you adopted a reading of Genesis that was consistent with a young Earth creationist view. On this kind of view, you think that the Earth is relatively young, only about 6,000 years old. Now, when it comes to the question, how old is the Earth? You've answered from your religious perspective, only 6,000 years old. Science, on the other hand, says that it's much older. You'd be hard-pressed to find a science textbook that says the Earth is only 6,000 years old, right? All the scientific evidence seems to point to a much older Earth than that. So here, once again, you've got a question, how old is the Earth? And you've got science and religion coming into conflict with each other. We can bring our conversation full circle. I started this video by suggesting that the question, do science and religion conflict, is a poor question. Why? Put simply, it's too general. However, I've also suggested throughout this video that if we make that question more precise, if we ask about the nature of the relationship between science and religion when it comes to particular questions and particular issues, then we can get some clarity. And what does the answer end up being? Do science and religion conflict? Well, sometimes they do, but often they don't. In future videos, I'll be unpacking a little bit more why I think that this question about whether science and religion conflict isn't the best way for us to understand the nature of the relationship between them. Till then, thanks for your attention. Thanks for watching.